That's, again, it's not clear.
Hi, folks. Can you hear us on our end?
That means you just have someone to or if
Oh,
that means you-
leave it. I'll come out. Yeah,
Down.
We can hear you.
perfect. We can hear you too. Great. I'm just gonna mute us for one moment till we get started. Give people a few more minutes. to-
But he's welcome to come down. He said he's available.
Okay.
You could believe it.
There's more. We are gonna start in just a minute. Okay, we are already recording. And we are expecting a couple more council members. We should have enough chairs, though I'm gonna go ahead and call
the meeting to order. This is the planning committee meeting of the City of Binghamton City Council. I'm Rebecca Rathmel, planning committee chair. Why don't we start with roll call for council members, and then we'll just go around the table first and then welcome introductions from folks on the phone. That sound okay? Also, can you hear me okay?
It's hard to hear you, Rebecca.
We'll adjust the mic and then
The volume in the back.
Think it's turned.
is that any better?
A little bit. Thank you.
Never had to turn that on, so we'll just assume that it didn't work.
No.
No.
Actually,
Okay.
no, it is not.
We're not even plugged in, April.
Maybe that would explain it.
Don't assume, I guess. We got it, Sam. When our text started recording.
Is it just a, USB? Do you have a, plug in your laptop? You plug it in the laptop?
Pull it for me.
If you're on the Zoom. Enter the Zoom.
But then we don't want, we'll have to mute on that one so that we don't have to echo.
We just had a community meeting yesterday.
Or maybe none of the sound works.
Also, our like.
Where's the mouse for this guy? Is this the mouse for that guy? Sorry, I'm gonna mute that one. It's recording.
You can't hear it on here either.
Mute yourself. I just hope this doesn't.
That'll be better. So.
You wanna try talking? Can someone try talking that's on the line, please?
I don't know if any.
Hi.
Sounds like maybe that's okay. Everyone can hear us?
Sounded echoey to me.
Does it echo when I talk?
No?
Try again.
Hello?
Ah, yeah.
If someone's unmuted while somebody else is unmuted, it also might echo, so if we can try to, yeah, unmute one at a time, that might be helpful. If you want me to get Bob down here, I can, but otherwise, we're good for now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna close these doors because the noise is a bit.
Okay, so we haven't even gotten through introductions, and I don't think we even really did council roll call.
No.
So I said who I am, Nate, do I go?
Dr. Matovetsky, 5th District, and I am not on this committee, I'm just sitting.
Are you doing council?
Oh, sure. I have Robert Devon, I'm the third district council person for the west side, kind of. Front Street, that was a red Parker. I think.
I'm Julia Burling, I'm the Director of Planning, Housing, and Community Development for the city. Kelly Robertson, Chief Operating Officer for Greater Opportunities.
Justin Roberts, Director of Housing for Greater Opportunities.
I'm Jordan Trice. I am on the Community Development Advisory Committee for the 5th District. I help allocate CDBG funding.
You folks on the phone, April, do you mind starting?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. April Ramsey, Director of Program Development with Family Enrichment Network, and I'm joined by Nora Bush, our Deputy Director.
Hi, I'm Melanie DeGraw. I'm a coalition builder with Cares of New York for COC 501 and 511.
Hi, my name is Megan. I'm from the YWCA, Director of Residential Services.
Hi, I'm Taylor Gillespie, Coalition Builder at Cares of New York for 511.
I think we also have Teresa. That's who's behind YWCA Binghamton, but she was scheduled to be off today, so. Okay, why don't we get started? So there is an agenda, there's an agenda that was sent out just for council members around the table, a little bit of context when it comes to the COC NOFO itself and, excuse me, council and CDAC members. So just like the Community Development Block Grant or HOME program, the Continuum of Care program or COC involves federal funding from HUD, specifically to support homelessness assistance services, rather than individual agencies submitting proposals directly to HUD. However, the program requires regional jurisdictions to identify local priorities and submit a collaborative application that represents both the strategic planning efforts that agencies are involved in to address homelessness and the projects that they want to see move forward. That application process happens annually, and it's referred to as the NOFA, which stands for Notice for Funding Opportunity. The regional jurisdiction or continuum of care that covers the city of Binghamton is NY 511. It includes Broome, Shenango, Portland, Delaware, and Tioga counties. Oswego's not.
Correct.
Okay. Our COC planning lead and collaborative applicant agency is responsible for compiling and submitting the final NOFO is CARES, and we've got CARES folks with us. The COC also has a NOFO committee that supports that application process, and most of the COC members around the table are on the NOFO committee. And then the COC is governed by a board, which Justin, you're newly elected as the president.
That is correct.
So we're well represented as far as COC agencies and organizations involved. I wanted to start with there are a lot of changes in this year's NOFO. They are driven by federal priorities that largely ignore the best practice that the sector has spent well over a decade honing, but they are the parameters the COCs have been given to work within. We don't have time to go through all the changes today, but where I'm hoping to camp out in, and where I think the city may have the most opportunity to potentially assist amidst all the chaos is related to the cap on permanent housing. Would either of our CARES folks or anyone on the COC want to represent the 30% cap on permanent housing for the group?
Well, what about,
Oh, yeah, I have no problem doing that. So essentially, the way the NOFO used to work is 90% of the overall funding would fall into a tier one, essentially a funded category. 10% would fall into a tier two that would look to be reallocated to alternative funding. Under the current guidelines that we've been given, out of the 100% of the overall NOFO funding, only 30% can be allocated for permanent supportive housing.
Was there a cap before, or this is a new?
This is a new regulation.
So that was roughly 1.29 million.
And now out of that complete 100% funding in the NOFO, that 90% used to be fall in tier one, only 30% now will fall into that tier one, leaving 70% of our overall funding look to be reallocated. So that's the extreme measure now. And just to give you a perspective, 100% of our COC funding is currently permanent supportive housing. Rapid rehousing, even though the name would lend to think that it's not permanent, under the definition, rapid rehousing, because it is intended to be short-term rental assistance in the community, is considered permanent supportive. So we're looking at 100% of our funding just needed to be, at least 70% of our funding needed to be reimagined.
Yeah, reimagine is definitely a word for it. And I mentioned that the COC covers 6 counties. I would anticipate that Broome is the only county that's going to have a large amount of unspent community development block grant dollars that could also potentially be reimagined in some capacity to offset or assist. I mentioned to a few folks when we started this meeting, I don't know that we'll land on all of the options and answers today, but wanted to start the conversation. The COC also has an extremely truncated timeline to compile and submit the application. Typically it's several weeks, a couple of months. January 14th, correct, is the date. So all of our reimagining is gonna have to happen over the holidays. So with all of, I guess first, any questions from folks on that particular change and what are we looking at with
So
the
just-
cap?
backing up to be clear about who's putting in this cap and why?
It's in the NOFO and HUD is putting in the cap.
So the federal government
It's
is
the
putting
federal
in
government.
cap to reduce access to permanent affordable
They're
housing.
shifting gears from the approach the last decade or so, right? It's been put people in houses, number one priority. And now we're shifting back to services first, essentially, right?
Of course, compliance model, yeah.
So housing first is a term.
Yeah, I've heard
most
that
folks on
before.
Council and obviously planning are familiar with. That's a best practice. that
Now we're going to
implemented.
housing last.
We're going to compliance-based, requiring folks to engage in and agree to access services. It's a housing ready model, might be the better term, as opposed to believing that folks should have the option of having a roof over their head and then move forward.
The recommendation is that the service compliance be part of the lease. So that if you're not participating in what is asked of you to do, that it's grounds for eviction. And just so we're clear, tier 1 is safeguarded funding, and tier 2 is open competition nationally. So that leads a lot of our programs, because 70% will be placed in tier 2, vulnerable. There's a lot of safeguards in the NOFO this year that federal government can take that money at any time. That HUD can, and that they're basing things based on previous practices, based on headlines in the area. That's spelled out in the NOFO this year. So it'll be interesting how it all flushes out.
So there could be nationally wide groups.
Not for our particular.
Trying to compete for our slice.
No, they're not gonna compete for our slice. We still get our slice, but instead of being rated low, your COC gets scored on a national level, essentially. So you're competing against the whole.
All of that used to happen internally as part of that collaborative applicant process. So individual applications from interested agencies to push forward. The proposals are rated and ranked by the NOFO committee within the COC. And that process, then the scoring, tier 1 used to be 90%. And obviously now that we've got 70-30. So the reallocating, the reimagining, there's also not new program components, but program components like transitional housing that previously were identified as not as cost effective and not as effective for obviously maintaining permanent stability and resurfacing as eligible components. So there may be some ways to maintain services within the transitional housing model, but there's a lot of barriers and challenges to that. So the COCs are working with a whole bunch of just trying to absorb the changes. Which is why I mostly wanted to limit as much as we can today to the what can we do, what's the impact, the actual impact to the permanent housing. And that's a helpful representation. That's been the permanent supported housing primarily is what we're, because I still even have the BSH and RRH in mind. Are there any other questions before we dig into like agency by agency, what we're looking at?
What's the total ballpark number?
1.29 for the 30% of
Guys, the whole, how much?
It's not a cut. It's a cut to, so the annual renewal demand remains the same. Oh, for the COC?
Yes.
What's the total ARD?
Karen, could you speak to that, what the annual renewal demand is for this upcoming NOFO?
I'd have to get the data. I'm gonna be like fully, transparent. So I started here about 3 weeks ago. So I'm proxying from Aubrey because as you can imagine, she's having a lot of meetings. So I can get you guys that information and send it over at the end of this meeting if that's okay. Or I can work on it right now with another colleague if you hold on. So what you're looking for exactly is the total amount for the entire COC?
For the New York 511.
Does someone have the GIW itself?
Just for 511, the GIW?
Yeah, that's all we need.
Okay, I'll be right
It kind of gets allocated in Broome County.
Right, yeah, and the 1.29 million is the overall impact to the permanent housing that we're.
That's the total, that's the cap is 1.29 million. And just in perspective, Greater Opportunities currently has over $1 million in COC funding. So that means obviously we have to fit in 5 counties in that 1.2.
So if that's the cap and that's 30%, then we're talking roughly $4 million. So there's 2.6 million or so that now has to go to different types of
Correct, so we're gonna spend all the money, it's not like the money will not come back. It will be completely different than it was, so anything that was permanent supportive housing. So we can't just convert it all to transitional housing because HUD doesn't wanna see that. There's 3 categories they're asking us to place the money in. Permanent supportive housing, even though they're changing the model, they still want those programs. Social, support services only, which is essentially street outreach, and then transitional housing. So you have 2 years, 24 months, in housing until you have to move on. The condition, though, of permanent supportive housing is even if you're in a permanent supportive housing, the expectation is that you move to unsubsidized housing, so not even Section 8 or subsidized housing, within a 24-hour time period, and that you increase your employment income by 50%.
24 months.
I know,
24
I
months, sorry.
Yep,
Sorry,
No,
24 months,
Hi, so the total number is 4 million, yeah, just over $4 million.
thank you.
Thank you.
And the goal, I would say, of calling this meeting, having this conversation is wanting to sustain as much as we can the either. Ideally, we're sustaining as much of the permanent housing as possible. And I do understand the reimagining is gonna have to happen. The applications are going to need to be submitted. The ARD will be sustained. So you'll have, like, obviously you're doing the transitioning to different program components. The whole COC is gonna be doing that, but whatever the city can do with the funding it has available to sustain services, to sustain operating within what's eligible under CDBG, so that you're looking at a less overall budget impact. So it's not just what's funded under COC per se at the moment, like your budgets are going to take a hit in a large way. And so how can we offset that is the hope and the conversation. Obviously, I think there's going to be a couple of different conversations happening at the same time.
But can I ask what kind of a reduction are you expecting? Well, what we're expecting is a reduction in the number of beds. So for example, greater opportunity, I can only speak to my programs. So greater opportunities just in our permanent supportive housing programs has 81 beds, 56 of them are located in the city of Binghamton, and then the remaining 25 are dispersed between Broome County and Shenango County. But we will not be able to maintain those 81 beds. And our beds are dedicated to chronically homeless. That will also not occur anymore.
So
Well, financially, the goal is to keep what we have, but there's not, so essentially, we're gonna have to, for lack of a better word, compete over the 1.29 million, of which parts are already taken for HMIS and coordinated entry. So those are automatics that have to be funded. Those automatically get put into tier 1. So whatever's left over that, all the programs will have to compete for. So we don't know what the financial implication is because we don't know what under tier 2 we will be funded. It's all dependent on the COC score.
for the sites that the beds are located at, and I think I'd like to have the same conversation with each of the agencies, the number of beds, and how many are in Binghamton, but also how many are site-based. So if you've got buildings in the city of Binghamton, that's what we want to hear too, because if the goal is to sustain as much as you can operations in those buildings, that's hopefully an offset opportunity in terms of operation. Correct.
And I think what we're gonna look at too, I mean, the evictions is a huge concern because a lot of the permanent supportive housing that's scattered site with the imposed 24 months. Most of our folks are extremely developmental, or extremely disabled. You know, we have developmental delays, we have a lot of mental health issues that require consistent attention that are not, just don't prevent, or they prevent employability. So with the 24-hour or 24-month time for, or yeah, 24-month time frame, the scattered site landlords are going to lose funding after that 24 months. And it just, we don't have the ability to just relocate and continue those services. So it kind of fundamentally changes our service structure. So like what we're really having to do from day one is not really address needs, it's try to find alternative housing options. Because most of the waiting lists for SPOAs, alternative housing resources are at least 24 months long in this area for something that'll pass any kind of inspection that's affordable quality housing. So the impact on the city, I think, is just very nuanced that we're not really even able to articulate at this point, because just the impending, you know, recidivism in these programs, I'm just anticipating to go through the roof, as opposed to the permanent side of things where we can isolate these hard to house individuals that have repeated through the system, where we've been able to identify landlords who will pass inspections, who will kind of deal with us on a deeper level, and they're extremely difficult to find. So the impact of that will be something, because my fear is we will lose those landlords as well because of the lack of continual funding.
One of the eligible activities under CEP is, and there are parameters within it obviously, but is making up for income loss. There's also, even though much of what is unspent, which we'll get into at some point, is limited currently to capital expenditures, as we spend that down, our percentage that can go towards services increases. And so rental assistance is a piece under CDBG services. So those are that's the broad offset, that even if we plan for 2 years from now, we currently have unspent funds, but every year we're going to have unspent funds. I mean, until, I won't say until CDBG gets cut, but barring any cuts to CDBG. And so I think we have the option to plan immediately, as well as to include in a spend down plan moving forward, how we're incrementally offsetting as much as we can annually, as y'all are facing and landlords are facing the income losses. So that's really helpful to point out. Thank you. For YWCA folks, would you be able to share number of permanent housing beds and total, and then those in the city of Binghamton? If someone's looking at the GIW, though, we can also pull.
So we do have 48 of permanent supportive housing.
Is that just at your 80, Holly?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, kind of an average length of tenancy at your permanent supportive in those units, like how many of these people are actually there?
People that's been with us for 16 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I would say on average, last time we ran a report for our shelter plus care, it was just under 3 years average length of stay. But I mean, out of that program, we also have extremely employable folks who have been able to kind of remove those barriers, achieve a level of self-sufficiency. And actually, we've had 2 homeowners out of that program too, just to kind of talk to the impact of, you know, they do contribute to taxpayer dollars. They are really valuable members of this community, not just a number that's in a housing unit too. So I mean, there's a lot of potential with time, and even those folks have been able to achieve that. It took over that 24-month time frame to get their credit in line, to kind of get things where they needed to be to achieve the ultimate success instead of continually like treading water and poverty.
Same question for what VOA is not with us. Ben doesn't have PSH, right? April?
Yeah, so we have PSH, but it's not funded by the COC.
Okay.
So what's your funding model?
Hey, so we receive funding from ESHI and the capital costs from HHAP. New York State.
Eastside Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative.
And you can only get Eastside dollars in connection with a capital project, so you can't get Eastside dollars for an existing project.
The primary capital for Eastside is HHAP, Homeless Housing Assistance Program. Yeah.
Yes.
They're both, those are both state. The state, I mean, we should probably point out the state is working to figure out conversations with OTDA. I know CARES has had, I think everybody's probably had conversations actually with OTDA. In terms of what they can do, waivers that are possible. I think there's probably, I would like to hear more about some advocacy options in terms of funneling up from a city council standpoint. But could we do the same questions? So YWCA and greater opportunities as far as staff that are supported in. So when we're talking 48 beds and 81 beds, 56 in Binghamton,
And this,
staff of funding
and this is
too,
the tricky
correct?
part, yeah, because when you look at who's funded through that, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 folks to cover, that caseload, and now with the requirement changing to 40 hours, that's where we're looking at a dramatic impact too, because just physically speaking, it's just not possible to serve, you know, a caseload, that intensely. So, I mean, we will have to reduce beds in order to be able to fund additional positions.
Can you speak to the 40-hour change?
Yes, right now, the requirement, and again, this is a housing first model, so services were never technically required to receive the benefits of the program. The advocates themselves are there to help inspire change over periods of time, you know, slow, incremental, sustainable change. Now with that, the requirement was a bare minimum of monthly meetings where you're touching on these goals, tracking progress, things of that nature, and it was all based on level of need. Not so much a required service model. So for now, now the proposed change that's in place now, it was 40 hours per week per person. So for one individual to have a caseload of, you know, over 10 people is just unrealistic because it doesn't have, they don't physically have to provide that service themselves, but they have to link with other service providers. Just the coordination alone for 40 hours a week per person is very
40 hours
time
of services delivered per person,
per week.
per week.
Yes.
And our 81 beds that I discussed.
The services
do not-
include lunch and dinner, like.
Yeah.
What
But that could be attending medical appointments, they could be employment does count, so if they are working, you know, that
Okay.
will count towards that. But when you're looking at the population that we serve of chronically homeless, it's a lift, to say the least, for the majority of the population.
There is operations funding eligible within CDBG as well. So like that's, again, it's a broad category and we'll go through some of them. Then I'll send out kind of the matrices if it matrices.
Rebecca, I just wanted to clarify that the 81 beds were permanent, but we also have an RRH program that serves what, minimum of 65 a year?
Yes.
When you say that we're reducing beds, like you said, this new project, is it like, essentially that doesn't get anybody filled in there?
No, the beds, no, they're two separate things. We're reducing the number of beds that have the subsidy for shelter plus care. The number of beds that Greater Opportunities currently operates does not go away. We will still have those. So.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, because it's not clear to.
Oh,
not clear to
sorry,
us.
I apologize. I meant subsidized beds. So a lot of individuals, for lack of this subsidy, will have a very difficult time maintaining permanent supportive housing.
Just from an operational standpoint, the subsidies is what like helps us pay our bills, like keep the lights on, you know, pay the insurances. Because with the capital funding, the HHAP that we're referring to, it's income-based housing. So if they come in with no money, there's no rent to be charged, you know. So if they come in and, you know, it's 30% of, you know, if they get us, you know, $1,000 just to make my math easy, a month in Social Security, it's $300 a month in rent. And just, you know, anyone who pays NYSEG bills understands that $300 in the winter barely pays the NYSEG. In some cases, doesn't pay the NYSEG bills. You know, so without the subsidies to maintain the sustainability of our current beds, at the level of what we do now to where they meet the Inspire requirements and the housing quality standard requirements for all Section 8 programs, things of that nature. It's a lift, you know, to say the least, with the rising maintenance costs especially.
The nice thing about all of the housing, I mean, that every agency on the phone and here, I mean, all of it is within, the only limitation, not only, but primary limitation when it comes to CDBG eligibility is a low and moderate income population, at least 70%. So y'all are already all hitting, like, there's no concern about eligibility there.
No.
But we hear it like scattered site landlords. Who signs those leases? The tenant or? Who's on the hook
It
for that?
depends on the program requirements. So in many cases, the leaseholders are the tenants themselves. But in the transitional model, the agency has to be the leaseholder. So that, again.
So now
poses
all of our
issues.
scattered site, if the lease was with the tenant, and will now have to revert to greater opportunities.
And then that clock starts on 24. Correct.
Yeah, and it'll end up being the provider that has to do at the end of the backlog. YWCA, staff connected to your PSH programming. You've got RH too, right?
Yes.
Housing.
So yeah, we have staff connected. I mean, we're still basically what Justin said, everyone's just kind of, we're getting the information, figuring out what's gonna fit us best as an agency and for the community.
How many staff are currently funded under COC permanent housing dollars?
That would be 3.
Okay, anything more on COC as far as questions or COC's impact, anything we didn't cover that needs? I'm sure there are things we didn't cover, but anything top of mind for folks that we should dig into before talking about CDBG?
Just because we speak in a weird language, anytime we're talking about bed reductions, it's not the physical bed, it's the service of the ability to provide a service to those beds.
Okay, so as far as community development block grant funding, obviously the City of Binghamton is a participating jurisdiction. We get an annual allocation, have for decades plus. Planning department folks and the Community Development Advisory Committee Council are currently reviewing applications for FY52. CDBG dollars, projects awarded for 50 and 51 have been allocated, still in process, but if we look back to, and Juliet, please correct me if I'm wrong, looking back from years 45 to 49, however, we have a significant accumulation of funds that may have previously been allocated but are currently unspent.
The only thing I would add to that is, if they're allocated, they're assigned a project. If they're unspent, that project could still be ongoing. That doesn't mean that we can't just release them. We have to verify where the project stands and then.
Yeah, if the funds are recaptured or not spent, do they have to be respent in the way in which they were originally allocated, or are you allowed to allocate them in a different way?
We can allocate them, as long as it's CDBG eligible, but.
And it's not programmed.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's, and I do believe at least like, I'm gonna throw out broad numbers, the particulars of them kind of change depending on availability. But I am aware of over 700,000 that is unspent and available. So in that category of not being used and could potentially be, I like that we're using the word reimagine, so let's stick with that. Thank you for that. And would be eligible under that broad scope of CDBG eligibility. Again, to start out, we are currently at our services cap. CDBG is split into capital uses and public services uses. There are several eligible activities under both. And just to reiterate, as we spend down capital, the percentage of services goes up. But right now we have to, well, I would say primarily we want to focus on capital. There is about 250,000 of the unspent CDBG funding that has to be spent by June 2026. So that's one of the parameters that we're working with. And then even though I threw out 700,000, we'll continue to get allocations. Things will fall off for 50, 51. Ideally, everything we allocate this year, last year, will move forward the way that it was supposed to. But again, I mean, we're working on an annual process to review what's not been spent, so we avoid kind of the significant accumulation. But if there's a silver lining to the fact that we have a significant accumulation right now, it's maybe being able to offset. Any questions on that before we get into kind of general and specific uses for CDBG capital?
Yeah, keep in mind that the final federal budget hasn't been approved, so we don't know exactly what we have to work with. The next fiscal 26, as it stands right now, there's, depending on what gets approved finally. So if the unspent funds haven't been and aren't going to continue to be used, that can be put into those gaps. So we have to keep that in mind also, because we're looking at huge impacts on CDBG. ESG for some reasons increasing. Yeah. So I just wanted to put that.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I hear you on that.
School people in my office funded, there's all of our rehab projects for homeowners are, and then solar trying to make that. Scratching that last week. So anyway, I just wanted to put that.
Sure.
Rebecca,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing her. Can you recap what she just said?
No, that's okay. So Dr. Burling was just representing that we're unsure what the 2026 budget is going to come down as well. So there may be cuts to CDBG or home, those two buckets where some of this unspent funding could be utilized to offset those cuts, which I think is a fair thing to bring up.
Money right there.
What's that?
That's money we give to the community also right there.
Right. So it's I mean, that's an unknown. And I think we do want to maintain some kind of a reserve locally, but when we're looking at this much that is accumulated, if there's a way to sustain the housing or the operations that are demonstrably impacting reductions in homelessness for folks, I think that's the point of the conversation. Yeah, we're going to be looking potentially and unfortunately at other cuts too. But anyway, we can all work together to allocate in a way to sustain would be the goal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that dollar amount you mentioned, it changes as the funds being used. So we have to pull it again just to see where we are now.
Yep.
Like the American Legion got their roof in, they spent it down. Thank you, American Legion.
Goodness. It's a little bit every day. It's check ready.
I know, I was behind
I was
that
gonna say.
I was behind that.
that.
every day, did you?
He brought us.
Are you spending the money yet? Are you spending the money yet? We need to spend the capital money down.
I think the easiest way to, I mean, most of you may already be familiar with what's eligible under CDBG in terms of capital. So I'm not presuming myself to be the expert by any means. I will send out a matrix that I have found is easiest when like understanding what's eligible. But I think I want to focus on broadly it's acquisition, it's conversion, it's rehabilitation under community development block grant funding. So rehabilitation really has, I think, the broadest scope when it comes to eligible activities, and residential, multifamily, and non-residential. for offices essentially that are providing operation support to those residential or public services are available, or excuse me, eligible. And as far as types of assistance under rehabilitation, it's, and I don't say this lightly, but it's really anything. So it's labor, materials, other costs of rehabilitation of properties and renovations, repair directed toward accumulation of deferred maintenance, replacement of principal fixtures, components of existing structures. I mean, one of the things we were talking about the other day is the switch to the, from the, $10 smoke detectors to the $65 combo. Like those are security cameras or devices, smoke detectors, locks, renovations through alterations or additions to enhancement of those structures. And I'll send all of this out, but as far as improvements in energy efficiency, installation of windows, doors, siding, like in terms of offsetting budget-wise broadly, what you're looking at in terms of how any of the cuts otherwise may impact your overall budget is like, it's not just a COC funding conversation, it's where do you have these potential, where can it get within your overall budget, the impacts be.
The previous, and correct me if I'm wrong, and we've applied for them, but we've never been able to apply for them specifically for housing units because there was a component in there about public and access to the public. And how many people will be served based on these renovations, and so that is obviously limited in a housing building to the people that live there. So would that change?
For my understanding,
No, for like any repairs and part of the CDBG application specifically asks a component of public and how the public would benefit from access, the rehab of like, so we've largely done our main office building on 5 West State Street. That's what we largely use CDBG funds from the city because it is available to the public, but we haven't been able to utilize it for individual buildings because of that component. So I didn't know that was a requirement of CDBG or if that was something that could be changed.
To my knowledge, the component is limited to so if it's in multifamily residential, it's the income level of households served, as opposed to having to ensure public access for a portion of the community that fits in that low to moderate income requirement.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be an eligibility, like with the Carroll Street buildings, while otherwise, like, I don't think there's a building that OFB, excuse me, needs owns, that wouldn't fall into that eligibility category, but I mean, I think.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. Okay.
And so, like, it's a broad scope. I wanted to mostly focus on the rehabilitation and renovations. There are, just look through the matrix. We talk energy efficiency. So when it comes to rehabilitation, administrative is eligible under that capital piece too. So anything that's required to, and I'm gonna look to you to correct me anywhere that you need to, but carrying out those rehabilitation. So the engineering, the professional services, the work steps, the loan processing, all of that is eligible under some capital if it's related to. So if you've got a renovation and repair project that you want to identify, and you've got costs under there administratively of putting that project scope together, all of those are potentially immediately available or eligible.
Can you use the funding, for, let's say, not a specific purpose, or, so one of the largest expenses that we have is, for lack of a better word, destruction of property. Apartments can potentially take, a lot of use. I mean, we've had repairs that were over $30,000, due to damages caused by tenants. So is this something that can be used as like to renovate apartments, but even if that you could use over time on multiple units, multiple things over time? Like the 12-month period, so it wouldn't be assigned because we may not have it, like the specific apartment at the time. But it would help offset maintenance costs, if that makes sense.
So a set aside.
Sort of staying for renovation of apartments as they become available, so that we could turn them over
But
quicker.
agency specific.
Yeah,
So a set aside for repair for.
Correct. That's,
Um,
we answered one.
I think, I heard like the same thing from PHA, like, if they have a, they can, so maybe there's like more.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm just asking in general.
Agency would appreciate a sense.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible. Our only concern is, when you
Spend
set,
down.
yeah, when you set aside money, it tends to, it's there when you need it and it doesn't get spent, it counts against it.
I'll be up everyone's phone. You'll be getting a daily call.
We won't have a problem spending it down and on, yeah.
Do you have damaged apartment? Can you spend it today? How about today? Is today the day?
And there's our, I mean, we've been in conversation with the BHA about this as well, just because specifically public housing modernization is an eligible activity. Other publicly owned are other 40-ish public housing, where the average year built is 1924. And clearly they're going to have not only needs, but deferred maintenance. So all of that is eligible. So I think, again, broad scope, like where in your budgets are you pulling funding that could be offset is the word that I keep using. I don't know if that's the best word to use. And then I think there's,
I mean, the best use, the most. We need to slot this money to capital
right.
uses first.
That-
But it sounds like their
That's what
funding cuts are service delivery oriented, so it's gonna be a matter of offsetting it.
Right.
Yeah, there's service delivery, but even with the operational costs and what we're looking at too, I mean, that's a fantastic idea because that would prevent our turnover times from, I mean, because where we're able to do it now is through those subsidized dollars. So if we lose those, that's where you look at the impact on the operational level that could potentially cause harm, because normal wear and tear is not the problem. You know, it's like Kelly's saying, it's, you know, the 1 to 3 times a year it happens where we have, you know, some extreme behaviors. Then we're looking at, you know, major capital investments, and if we don't have that in reserve accounts, you know, there's buildings that we have that are not HHAP funded, that don't have healthy reserve accounts, that don't have the subsidies in it. If we had a time to do that, that would look at, I mean, months of time for us to try to, you know, make that work, to get it back to the standard of living to where it needs to be.
There's also.
No, it's just, it's all for us, we need to be mindful that this is kind of a one-time pot of money that built up over 7 or 8 years.
Longer.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8 5, people on roughly 8 years, to have a revenue, this is what you want.
But we haven't been including 51.
Right.
Right, we said.
We're in 51.
I did agree with you.
But I mean, it's taken this
I'm
long.
just saying, yeah.
The loss of rental income piece, so it's payments to owners of housing for loss of rental income due to temporarily holding rental units for persons displaced by CDBG assisted activity. Which like
Relocation, essentially.
a bit, yeah. And so, but I mean, even with that, I think there are ways to get creative. I mean, acquisition and construction is eligible. I don't think anyone's necessarily looking at that, like that's new as opposed to sustaining. The other piece that Oh, convergent, so shelters and transitional housing. Conversions to transitional housing is an option. So as you're discussing all the programs that may need to reimagine themselves as transitional housing, conversions to that.
So that's, so if I was going to say, it's kind of one. This amount of money is going to be one type thing that looking at, and I'm assuming, I don't think I'm the first course, unfortunately, on this funding change for the next few years. So is this best kind of used to provide a soft landing to the new reality? Maybe looking at what it takes for transition units or something.
It's gonna be like, it's kind of confusing, but HUD money is kind of like behind. So, for example, like some of these changes, even though we have to have the application in, you won't see some of these beds change over until, like, for example, we have a program that starts 7/1/26. So until that time,
But
we
that
have to
also means you won't see
maintain-
them change back if that happens. Or you won't see them change back for that delay.
changed to meet the model that was
Yeah.
there, and now the model's changed,
Yeah.
so.
Do you
Government.
anticipate,
Yes.
in terms of timeline and being able to draw down funds to support current operations, so between January, when applications are due, and whatever they decide to do after that? Like, do you anticipate delays in being able to draw down for any reason, for some of these offsets would also?
So CARES has been calling all the programs because we're supposedly not finding out till at least May. But there are programs with starting years of obviously start fiscal years of January 1st. So we have one that's May that may or may not be affected, and then we have one that's July 1st that they think will be okay. So, and then our other one doesn't end until 12/31/26. So there are some other programs though that may have this affect them, depending on when their COC funding starts.
CARES folks, do you have, start dates on the any broad notion of projects that have January 1 start dates?
I'm pulling it up now to see when, let's see. In 511, I don't see any that have, well, no, it looks like there's this greater opportunity for Broome and Shenango one, the shelter plus care, that's the January one.
That's for.
That started, oh, hold on, I have the wrong sheet up, one moment. We have a lot of docs right now. I'll be right back with you.
Sure, can someone quickly just, shelter plus care was a former program component under COC, and when you hear that, just understand it's permanent supportive housing, not a new term that you need to know.
Yeah, the shelter plus care is for the chronically homeless as well, so you're looking at the most vulnerable population, that's our 56 beds.
I don't actually, do they maintain a chronic prioritization?
If you have the designation for,
Yeah, we
you
keep it.
cannot keep it unless you reallocate. Under transitional model.
Another layer,
Makes,
reimagine.
makes perfect sense.
I
I
mean,
still have
there's-
family enrichment on, or anyone, any
They
comments
were
from
still-
those folks on their, the kind of offsets that we were talking about and needs?
Hi, thanks. I know you're really focusing on housing, so I didn't want to take away from that at all because I know it's a big issue. Honestly, I'm jumping on this call because if there's some additional CDBG capital funds that could be spent, we submitted a proposal for an elevator at our Washington Street site for the next fiscal year, but we could easily spend those funds. And we're moving our homeless prevention, so our ESG program over to Washington Street, as well as our fatherhood program.
April, you're on my list to call. So this committee conversation was one step, but I'm also reaching out to executive directors that have submitted for capital funding currently and in the past. And actually, I'm not really much looking at currently, but in the past, as we develop this spend down plan. So it certainly heard as far as the capital need existing. We already, I think, have more applications for capital funding than we're gonna come close to being able to fund with FY 52, and that's almost always the case. But that's a conversation that I was hoping to have with you, but probably not until next week or the following.
Yep, completely fine. I didn't want to take away from this conversation, but just letting you know, the need is there, obviously. Rebecca, we also have our reentry program over there. And all serving low to moderate income individuals. So look forward to a conversation.
Thanks. Okay, so, I mean, as far as, and we still have some more space, or some more time, so we don't necessarily need to wrap up. But I would say, let me know what's most helpful, the matrix that I have found most helpful for understanding, summarizing what eligible activities are. And just the specific regulations that outline the types of assistance that are, I know that you're reimagining internally, and I'm sorry if this feels like a burden to try to include figuring out how to also fit in potentially.
No,
like
we
other funding.
appreciate it. You know, it's just kind of every day is a new thing, so it's just trying to wrap your head. So it might take us a minute just to even figure out where we need it. Because we honestly haven't even been able to have the conversations of where we're gonna pull things from as it is. So, but we really appreciate even the thought of
really,
including us and, trying to make this happen in other ways. So we're very grateful for that.
Of course, and this doesn't need to be the last conversation. It also doesn't have to be like a group setting per se. I mean, Juliet's office, the planning department as a whole is available. I mean, I'll send out what I can, and then completely understandable that you've got to prioritize what you're doing with COC. I get that. But we can certainly schedule another planning committee meeting to hash out, or we can just hash out individually and see what might be able to assist. I mean, we're obviously looking at a June 2026 spend down on some level, but that's not the only conversation that we have to have, or the only priority. So
I'm wondering if OTEDA would consider expanding Empire State's Supportive Housing Initiative dollars to that's not directly linked with capital projects or existing projects to help offset some of the rental subsidies.
Give me that acronym one more time.
Oh, sorry, it's ESHI, ESSHI, Empire State Supported Housing Initiative. This came out several years ago, but they're incredible grants. They provide operating support. They also do rental subsidies. They'll pay for furniture. They'll pay for transportation. It's an incredible grant. And they're
I'm
5
looking
years.
for it to extend.
But right now you have to have a current capital project under construction.
Okay,
And if you don't, you can apply for each dollars. So,
okay.
Rebecca had discussed advocacy, and that would be, and, you know, to advocate, unless they want to expend night shift dollars on rental subsidies.
Yeah.
But I have
do
to-
we're not getting night shift awards until January? Or do we know?
If they don't
Oh.
provide rental subsidies and the other operational support that ESHI does. So, I mean, the goal would be to bring night shift up to date with ESHI standard, but that is not.
There's a night shift round out there now, right?
No, there was a night shift round out for
Night shift?
extra New York State Supportive Housing Program, and that strictly pays for operating costs. That extra, there was a round out that was for additional funds for programs that may have been underperforming. So they opened it up to all the night shift programs, but we had not heard on that funding at all. And the new night shift round, I believe we're going into our, I think it's next year it comes out for the new night shift round, correct? And we're still waiting for the new ESHI funding to come out, which we will apply for our Griswold Street project. But that would be
The newest Griswold Street.
the newest one.
I'm just looking quickly through the rest of the eligible activities, just to be sure. There's an operations one. I mean, homeless facilities are not operating costs. Anything else we feel like we need to touch on?
Thank you for all of you for attending and doing.
Yeah.
Me and somebody that's not in this world, you know, much as all of you, so it's
Absolutely, anytime.
a much better picture of depressingly where we're at. And what you're having to do on a daily basis.
No, again, we really appreciate the invite, the opportunity to kind of collaborate on this. So, yeah, I mean, just the thought of, you guys reaching out, offering the opportunity to offset some of these wild changes that have kind of taken place is helpful to know that we feel supported during this time, yeah.
Okay, well, I think I need a motion for adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Sorry, everyone, if there's any additional questions, you guys,
Thanks, Paul.
if there's anything additional that I didn't answer that I can get from Aubrey and bring back, if you could just let Justin know, and I would be happy to do that. I apologize that I'm so new and couldn't be more useful.
No apology needed. Thanks for being here. We're coming now.
Sorry.
So if we're talking organizations that have some sort of housing beds in Binghamton,